Eleanor had it all. Until one night, she pretended to sleep and left her $5 million jewelry box wide open. But what her maid's little boy did next left her frozen in shock. Eleanor was a billionaire in her late 40s, elegant yet intimidating. Her life was a symphony of power meetings, charity galas, and private jet flights. People admired her, but also feared her, because behind the charm was a woman who trusted no one. She had been betrayed before, and that scar ran deep. Her last betrayal had come from someone she treated like family, her personal assistant. Eleanor had given that woman everything, only to discover stolen millions and a staged disappearance. That wound never healed. So when she hired Maria, a young black woman, as a live-in maid, Eleanor promised herself one thing: never trust too quickly. Maria had come into Eleanor's life 6 months ago, through a domestic agency. She wasn't like the others. There was a quiet dignity about her. Humble but proud, hard-working but never desperate. She carried herself with grace, despite her worn-out shoes and second-hand dresses. And then there was her son, Jordan, barely 10, polite, sharp-eyed, and full of questions about everything. Eleanor noticed things, like how Maria never ate at the same time as her, but waited until the kitchen was quiet. How Jordan never touched anything expensive, even when Eleanor offered. They were careful, too careful, almost as if they didn't want to cross a line. For most people, that would have been enough proof of honesty. But Eleanor was not most people. So one evening, as the rain drummed softly against the windows of her palatial bedroom, Eleanor decided to test them. Not out of cruelty, she told herself, but for certainty. She needed to know if loyalty could still exist in a world poisoned by greed. The plan was simple. She would fall asleep in her private lounge with her jewelry box, worth over $5 million, sitting wide open on the table. Inside were diamond necklaces, sapphire rings, and a rare emerald bracelet that had once belonged to her mother. Beside the box, she would leave her platinum credit card and a thick wad of cash, deliberately unguarded. If temptation was ever going to strike, this was the moment. But there was more. Eleanor wanted to see not just Maria's reaction, but her son's. Children, in Eleanor's mind, were honest mirrors of their parents. If the boy so much as touched a single coin, Eleanor would know the truth. She rehearsed everything. She told the staff to leave early, made sure security cameras were rolling, and even dimmed the lights to make it look natural. Then she called Maria and Jordan to bring her evening tea. When they arrived, Maria in her crisp uniform and Jordan clutching a small notebook, Eleanor smiled faintly and said, "I'm a little tired tonight. Just leave the tea here." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, a rare thing. Maria nodded, set the tray down, and gave a small bow before leaving. But Jordan lingered, his curious eyes scanning the shelves of rare books. Eleanor noticed and chuckled. "Do you like reading, Jordan?" "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. "But we don't have many books at home." That answer tugged at something inside her, but she brushed it aside, pretending to yawn. "Well, maybe one day you'll read all of these." She let her head sink against the velvet armrest, her breathing slowing. Within minutes she was asleep, or at least that's what they thought. Through her barely opened lashes, Eleanor saw Maria return quietly, holding a folded blanket. She draped it over Eleanor with a tenderness that felt almost maternal. Eleanor fought the urge to speak. And then came the boy. Jordan tiptoed in, his small frame moving closer to the glittering box of jewels. Eleanor's pulse quickened. This was it. The real test. Would he touch it? Jordan stared at the diamonds for a long time, his eyes wide with something Eleanor couldn't read. Was it greed? Wonder? Or something else? Before Eleanor could decide, the boy did something that made her heart pound harder than any business deal ever had. Jordan stood frozen, His small hands curled into fists as he gazed at the jewelry box. The diamonds sparkled like tiny stars, each one worth more than his mother could earn in 10 lifetimes. He looked around the room, silent, grand, intimidating. The billionaire woman lay motionless on the chaise, her breathing slow and steady. Jordan swallowed hard. In his young mind, thoughts collided like crashing waves. If I take just one, just a small piece, we could be free. Mom wouldn't have to scrub floors. We could leave this giant house and never worry again. But then another thought came, heavier than the first. Mom always says, we don't take what's not ours, no matter how hard life gets. Jordan clenched his jaw. He reached out, not toward the jewels, but toward the teacup, lifting it gently and setting it on the tray so it wouldn't spill. Then, without touching anything else, he sat down on the edge of the carpet and opened his little notebook. His pencil danced silently as he sketched the jewelry box, the shapes of the gems, and even the intricate wooden patterns on the lid. Eleanor watched everything through her half-closed eyes. Her heart gave a strange twist. He's drawing it? Jordan's world was simple. He loved to draw because drawing didn't cost anything. He could take something beautiful and make it his, at least on paper. That was enough for him. Minutes later, Maria came back in, wiping her hands on her apron. She froze when she saw Jordan near the table. "Jordan," she whispered sharply, "what are you doing?" The boy looked up, guilt flashing across his face. Not because he had stolen, but because he knew what she might think. "I was just drawing, Mama. Look." Maria hurried over, snatched the notebook, and sighed in relief when she saw the sketches. But her voice trembled as she scolded him softly. "You can't sit this close to things that don't belong to us. People like us don't get second chances." Those words struck Eleanor like a knife. People like us. She'd heard that tone before, in boardrooms, in country clubs, always dividing the world into us and them. But coming from Maria, it carried no arrogance, only fear. Maria gently took Jordan's hand. "Come on, let's go to the kitchen." But as they turned to leave, Eleanor shifted slightly, making the blanket slip from her shoulder. Maria gasped and quickly adjusted it, whispering, "Sleep well, ma'am," before tiptoeing out. The door closed. Silence filled the room again, and Eleanor lay there, her mind spinning. She had expected greed, temptation, maybe even a little dishonesty. What she saw instead was something rarer than diamonds: restraint, humility, and an innocence that this world had almost forgotten. Still, Eleanor wasn't ready to reveal anything. She needed to see more. So she waited until midnight, when the house was still and the rain had turned into a gentle drizzle. Then she slipped out of bed, padding barefoot down the hall toward the small room where Maria and Jordan slept. The room was modest, barely bigger than a walk-in closet in Eleanor's world. 2 narrow beds, a single lamp, a stack of well-worn books, and a jar of coins on the dresser labeled Jordan's school fund. That jar made Eleanor pause. She leaned closer, counting maybe $30 in loose change. Her chest tightened. She turned to leave, but stopped when she heard soft murmurs. Maria's voice, low and soothing. "One day, baby. One day you'll go to college, become an architect, build houses so big even the sky can't touch them." Jordan's sleepy voice. "Do you really think so, Mama?" Maria kissed his forehead. "I know so, because you've got something money can't buy: dreams." Eleanor's throat burned as she walked back to her room. She thought of her own childhood, a mansion filled with luxury but empty of love. Her parents gave her everything except time. They were too busy making money, too busy showing off wealth. And here was Maria, with nothing but coins in a jar, giving her son a treasure Eleanor never knew: hope. The billionaire lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, questioning everything she believed about trust, loyalty, and what truly made someone rich. But before she could decide what to do, Fate threw another test into their lives. One that would force everyone to show who they really were. It started the next morning with a phone call. Eleanor's broker, voice urgent. "Ma'am, there's been a breach. Someone leaked your financial details to the press. Stocks are dropping. You need to lock everything down." Her heart pounded. Another betrayal? From who? She had her doubts about everyone, except Maria. But now, paranoia whispered in her ear. What if kindness was just a mask? What if they played you? Eleanor summoned the entire staff. Faces turned pale as she spoke coldly. "There's been a security breach. Until I find out who's behind it, no one leaves this house." Maria's eyes widened, clutching Jordan protectively. Eleanor noticed, and for the first time in years, doubt wasn't her only emotion. There was fear. Fear of losing something she didn't even know she valued. Until now. What Eleanor didn't realize was that this incident would lead to the moment that froze her blood. The moment when Maria's child would do something no one saw coming. And when it happened, Eleanor's world would never be the same. The mansion felt like a prison the next morning. The staff moved nervously, whispers floating through the marble halls like shadows. Security guards stood at every exit, their black suits sharp against the pristine white floors. Eleanor sat at the head of the long dining table, her eyes like steel. Maria stood silently behind the chair, Jordan clutching her hand tightly. Eleanor glanced at the boy. He looked frightened, his big brown eyes darting from guard to guard. Eleanor's chest tightened, but she couldn't afford weakness now. "I want everyone's phones," she said firmly. "Hand them over." One by one, the staff obeyed. When it was Maria's turn, she passed her old cracked phone without hesitation. Eleanor checked it. No suspicious messages, no strange numbers. Still, suspicion lingered in her mind like a stubborn shadow. Her empire was bleeding. The news channels were buzzing with headlines. Whitmore assets under fire. Her rivals were circling like vultures. And all she could think about was the possibility that someone under her own roof had sold her out. By noon, the rain returned, pounding against the windows like angry fists. Eleanor sat in her private study, staring at security footage from the previous night. The footage she thought would bring her peace. Instead, it deepened the storm inside her. There was Jordan, sitting near the jewelry box, sketching quietly. No theft, no sneaky movements. Just a boy drawing. She zoomed in on his face, saw the concentration in his eyes, the innocence. And yet she couldn't shake the thought. What if they're smarter than I think? What if this is an act? A knock on the door pulled her from her spiral. It was Maria. "Ma'am," she said softly. "May I speak with you?" Eleanor nodded curtly. Maria stepped in, closing the door behind her. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I understand you don't trust anyone right now. But please, my son has nothing to do with this. He's just a child." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, Eleanor saw the weight Maria carried. Fear, desperation, but also a fierce, unbreakable love. "I know what people think of us," Maria continued, her eyes glistening. "That we're always after money, always ready to take what's not ours. But that's not who I am. That's not who my boy is. I've worked too hard teaching him right from wrong. Please don't punish him for something he didn't do." Eleanor stared at her, silent. Inside, a battle raged. She wanted to believe Maria. Every instinct screamed that this woman was telling the truth. But betrayal had carved its lessons too deep. "Until I find out who's behind this," Eleanor said finally, her voice cold but shaky. "No one leaves. Not even you." Maria lowered her gaze, nodded slowly, and left without another word. That night, the storm grew violent. Thunder shook the windows, lightning split the sky. Eleanor couldn't sleep. She paced her bedroom like a restless ghost, thoughts colliding in her mind. Around midnight, The fire alarm blared. Smoke filled the corridor, thick and choking. Eleanor ran out, heart pounding. A candle had tipped over in the staff wing, flames licking the wooden panels. Panic erupted as guards scrambled for extinguishers. "Where's Jordan?" Maria's scream sliced through the chaos. She tore through the smoke, coughing violently, searching for her son. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She followed instinct, sprinting toward the flames. Through the haze, she saw a small figure, Jordan, trapped in a far corner, clutching his notebook, terrified. "Jordan!" Maria cried, trying to reach him, but a beam crashed down, blocking her path. Without thinking, Eleanor moved. She grabbed a heavy fire blanket from the wall, wrapped it around herself, and plunged into the smoke. Heat scorched her skin, her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. She reached the boy, scooped him into her arms, and shielded him as debris fell around them. When they emerged, the staff gasped. Eleanor collapsed to her knees, clutching Jordan tightly. He was shaking, but alive. Maria fell beside them, sobbing into her son's hair. Eleanor looked at Jordan, at the soot smudged across his innocent face, and something broke inside her. For the first time in decades, she felt something pure, something money had never given her: purpose. Jordan pulled back slightly, his small voice trembling. "Thank you, ma'am." Then, as if remembering something, he held up his soaked, crumpled notebook. "I didn't want to lose this." Eleanor blinked, taking the notebook gently. Inside were sketches, not just of jewels, but of rooms in the mansion, bridges, towers, entire cities. The imagination of a child who dreamed bigger than his circumstances. Her throat tightened. "You want to build these?" she whispered. Jordan nodded shyly. "One day, for my mom." And in that moment, everything Eleanor believed about loyalty, about worth, shattered. But the night wasn't over. As firefighters doused the last flames, her chief of security approached, face pale. "Ma'am," he said grimly, "we traced the leak. It wasn't anyone in the house. It came from your partner's office downtown." The words hit her like a tidal wave. All this suspicion, all this fear, and the enemy wasn't here. It was out there. Eleanor turned slowly toward Maria and Jordan, who sat huddled together, trembling from smoke and shock. Guilt washed over her like acid. She had doubted the only people who had shown her genuine care. But what happened next would freeze her in place. Because when she walked toward them to apologize, Jordan stood up, holding something in his tiny hand. And it wasn't his notebook. It was her mother's emerald bracelet. Eleanor's heart stopped. The sight of that emerald bracelet in Jordan's small, trembling hand sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. Time seemed to slow. The thunder outside, the crackling of embers, even her own heartbeat faded into a deafening silence. Maria gasped when she saw what her son was holding. "Jordan," she whispered hoarsely, snatching the bracelet from him. Her eyes darted to Eleanor, wide with terror. "Ma'am, I swear, he didn't steal this. He didn't." But Eleanor raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Her gaze locked on Jordan, whose lips trembled as tears welled in his eyes. "Why?" Eleanor asked softly, so softly it scared even herself. "Do you have this?" Jordan swallowed hard, his little chest rising and falling rapidly. "I found it," he whispered. His voice cracked. "When you went into the fire, it fell off your arm. I didn't want it to get burned." The words hit Eleanor like a lightning bolt. She stared at him, trying to process. Found it? Saved it? Not for himself, but for her? Maria clutched her son tightly, tears streaming down her soot-streaked cheeks. "He was only trying to help, ma'am. Please believe me." Her voice broke into sobs. "We don't steal. I've taught him better than that." Eleanor sank slowly to her knees, her silk nightgown soaked with water and smoke. She looked at the boy, this fragile, Brave little soul who had risked himself for something that wasn't even his. She thought of his jar of coins, his notebook full of dreams, the words Maria whispered every night about college and a better life. Something inside Eleanor shattered. All the walls she'd built around her heart, all the years of suspicion and loneliness, they crumbled in an instant. "Jordan," she said, her voice trembling, "come here." The boy hesitated, glancing at his mother, then stepped forward cautiously. Eleanor reached out, cupping his small, soot-stained face in her manicured hands. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "You saved it for me?" Jordan nodded quickly, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I didn't want you to lose it. You looked so sad when you were sleeping last night. I thought it was special to you." Eleanor pulled him into her arms and held him tightly, tighter than she'd held anyone in decades. And for the first time in her life, tears streamed down her own face, mingling with the smoke and rain. Maria stood frozen, disbelief written all over her face. She had never seen the billionaire cry. No one had. When Eleanor finally pulled back, her eyes were red but determined. She turned to Maria and spoke words that would change both their lives forever. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for doubting you, for everything." Her voice cracked. "You've given me something no one else has: truth, love, loyalty, things I thought didn't exist anymore." Maria's lips trembled. She didn't know what to say. Eleanor took a deep breath, then looked down at Jordan. "You said you want to build houses someday?" Jordan nodded shyly. Eleanor smiled through her tears, a real smile, warm and unguarded. "Then you will. Starting tomorrow, I'm opening a trust fund for your education. Full scholarship, best schools, everything you need." Maria gasped. "Ma'am, I can't accept that." "You can, and you will," Eleanor interrupted gently, her voice firm but kind. "Not because you owe me anything, but because you've shown me what real wealth is. And it's not money." Jordan's eyes widened, his little hands clutching his notebook. "Does that mean I can really be an architect?" Eleanor laughed softly, brushing a smudge of soot from his cheek. "Not just an architect, sweetheart. The best one this city has ever seen." Maria collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably, tears of relief, gratitude, and disbelief all at once. She had walked into this mansion as a maid, certain that life would always be about survival. And now, her son's future shone brighter than the emerald bracelet in Eleanor's hand. But the surprises didn't end there. Eleanor stood, her voice regaining the commanding tone that built empires. But now it carried something new, warmth. "I'm promoting you, Maria," she said firmly. "No more scrubbing floors. From now on, you're the head of household staff. Double salary, private suite, everything you need. And when Jordan goes to college, I'll make sure you're right there, watching him walk across that stage." Maria covered her mouth, sobbing harder. Why are you doing this for us?" Eleanor looked at her with tearful eyes. "Because last night, I realized something. Money can buy mansions, cars, even loyalty for a while. But it can't buy goodness. And goodness is what you've given me." The storm outside began to calm, the rain softening to a gentle drizzle. Inside the mansion, the fire was out, but something else had been ignited. A bond stronger than gold, forged not by wealth, but by trust, sacrifice, and love. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the glass walls, painting everything in hues of gold. Eleanor sat by the window, Jordan curled up asleep in her lap, Maria dozing nearby in a chair. For once, the billionaire didn't feel alone. She glanced down at the emerald bracelet in her hand, the same one she had once believed could define worth. She smiled faintly and slipped it into Jordan's notebook, tucking it between the pages as a promise. A promise that from this day forward, they weren't just employer and maid. They were family. If this story touched your heart, Don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. For more exciting, emotional, and shocking true life stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video.